All right, now before I get into this video, I have to do a quick disclaimer here. I am outside in the 37-degree Victorian heat, and it's not the easiest thing to stand here and be able to record without losing focus or having water. You can probably see the beads of sweat as they trickle down my cheeks, and I'm wearing a black shirt in the hopes that it's not going to show up the sweat so much, which is probably a terrible idea because we know black absorbs heat, and this is not going to end well. But it's 37 degrees Celsius out here, and if you're watching this from the United States or somewhere else that doesn't use the metric system, I can't really help you because I'm not sure how many football fields that gets measured in. Anyway, what I'm going to discuss in this video is an approach to budgeting that I use, and I refer to it as income allocation. So this is to be distinguished from another type of budgeting, which is, I would think, more so tracking your expenses. So it's more, this way is more so focused on what you do with your income when it comes in, as opposed to simply tracking how much you spend and then measuring that against your income. So how this starts is we have our expenses. Now I've just created an arbitrary list here, so yours might look completely different to this, but we have a list of expenses and we have their amount, how many paychecks there are, over which period of time these expenses come due, and then you end up with a budget. So to come up with a basic budgeting amount for each expense, you simply just divide that total amount by the amount of paychecks over that time period, and then you end up with the budget there. So obviously $1,600 divided by 4 will give you $400, and so on down the line. Now obviously if you pay an expense weekly, like food, like petrol, like spending perhaps, then obviously whatever it is that you've decided you're going to allocate for that expense, that is just going to be divided by 1, so that's just what it is each week. So now we've got that down pat, that's pretty straightforward. What I do is I'll start off actually with just explaining the principle over for one expense. We'll just go with rent. We'll start with rent, okay? So we can see here, rent is due every 4 paychecks, more or less. Let's say rent has just been paid. So we know that for rent, it's going to be due every 4 paychecks. Let's go 4 and 8 here. So on this side of the table, this is where you set that allocation, right? I call it as well, this is like a budget forecast. So this is where you project from where you are now into, in this table, this goes over 10 paychecks or 10 pay cycles. And you project what the budget allocation is going to be for each expense, 10 paychecks in advance from this place where we are right here at the first one. So we know that rent's going to be due every 4 weeks. So what we're going to do is pretty much input that $400 allocation every single week. So think about this as, and this isn't your bank balance. What we do here is this is how much, when you get paid, this is how much of that paycheck you're allocating to this expense, right? So this is one pay cycle in isolation. Now you're going to have a bank balance that is on a separate worksheet, but you're going to have a bank balance as well that's going to accrue. And so this is going to stack up, right? You only have a rent bill come due once every month. So you allocate $400 per paycheck. And so in the bank account, you're going to have 400 plus 400 plus 400 plus 400. By that 4th week, that will have accrued to $1,600, and you'll pay the bill, the money's there, easy done. Don't have to worry about it. Okay, the beauty of allocating like this in front of you and projecting out into the future is that you can actually adjust, you can adjust each individual pay cycle if need be to the reality of that pay cycle, what your financial situation is when you actually get paid in that week. So what that might be is you might suddenly have some financial demand that hits you in week 2, and suddenly you need to come up with some cash that you haven't actually allocated to whatever the expense was. So you might decide to take that out of how much you've allocated for rent that week. So let's say you need to allocate only $200 because you need the extra $200 for something else. Now you know, right? Looking at this, if you get to week 4, currently you've suddenly got only $1,400 accrued by week 4, and your rent bill is $1,600. You're not going to be able to afford rent. So you can now go, all right, I know that over these next 2 paychecks or these next 2 pay cycles, I need to make up that $200. So you can then project yourself and forecast yourself here and go, oh, instead of paying 400, I'm gonna have to put that $200 back in. So I'm gonna maybe increase each of those, how much I allocate for each of those weeks, by $100 each to make up that $200. So now you can see here that I've projected that even though I haven't been able to allocate the full 400 this week, I've made that up over the next pay cycles, and that's allowed me then to have the $1,600 to pay the bill. Now, you can do this across as far as you want to go into the future, but obviously this is a very dynamic approach that you adapt and you adjust as your financial situation unfolds on a week-to-week basis, or if you get paid fortnightly, on a fortnight-to-fortnight basis, you always revisit this. And so this is a fundamental kind of principle or the underlying dynamic nature of approaching your money in this way. I find it incredibly fun and rewarding, because especially once you start stacking each expense item on top of each other and then adjusting the allocation for every single expense item on a week-to-week basis, you start to get, it starts to feel more like a puzzle that you're solving, like a riddle that you have to sit there and figure out, right? Because if you have a fixed income, right? Let's say you have $1,000. The heat's starting to get to both the whiteboard and the texture here. If you have $1,000 income for that pay cycle, all right, let's just input this here. So we'll go 50 for utilities, 200, 50, 25, 50, 100. So if we add up that entire allocation thus far, we've got that is going to equal 875. Which means that we've got $125 that we haven't allocated for. Maybe we'll put that into savings, right? So you can allocate that $125 to savings. So that's going to now bump this up to 1,000. And we've now allocated the entire paycheck for that week. And that's what you're kind of aiming for, right? Your money always wants a place to go, because if your money doesn't have a place to go, your money's going to go bloody anywhere. So make sure that you have somewhere for every single cent of that income that you earn. Every single cent of it has to go somewhere. So make sure that you have an item that you can allocate it to. That's the key. So that's an example for week one, right? Now let's say hypothetically, suddenly you have car troubles, like I said, and maybe you need to increase how much you've got. Let's just say on this list first, you're spending money, and instead of the 100, you need to have that 300. So we've already basically accounted for that. So that extra 200 you've taken out. If we've got a $1,000 paycheck here, everything else remains constant. $125. Okay, everything else remains constant, but you've taken the $200 that you would have allocated for your rent, and you've now chucked it down into spending so that you can quickly afford to, I don't know, whether it's you've blown like 3 tires at once and you've got to pay for new tires or whatever, and you've put those in there, and that's going to give you that $1,000. Now, of course, I've just used rent in this example as a hypothetical, right? But you can take that extra $200 from anywhere, right? You can decide instead, if you go, oh, I don't feel comfortable taking it from rent, maybe I'll instead take that 125 that I was going to put here and not allocate anything to savings, and that's going to give me 225 that I can allocate. Okay, I still need to come up with $75. Maybe you'll decide that you're not going to pay so much for clothing, so you're not going to put anything towards clothing. Maybe streaming, you'll cut it out of there. So there you go. You've just come up with that $75 by not allocating, by removing those allocations for your streaming and clothing and saving. So that's just a way you can toy around with it. Fortunately, probably for yourself, but also for me, the video got cut off by the sun because, as we know, technology sometimes when it overheats, it doesn't like to do the technology thing. But I'm going to leave the video here. I think that's probably enough to describe in a basic enough format the principles that underlie budgeting via income allocation. So let me know what you think. If you have any questions, any follow-ups, any clarification that you'd like, I would love to produce more content on exactly what this is, what it entails, and how it all comes together. So please share it around, get in touch with me via the comments section below, and like the video if you think it's effective, if you think it was useful, and I'd love to hear from you. So please get in touch. Thank you very much for watching.